Are you prepared to take the oath, Senator?
I am.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
That I will execute the office of President to the United States faithfully.
And will to the
This
best of my
is
ability
Preserve
the most
defend.
significant and historical moment in American history. It also has an enormous impact for the global community. An African American has been elected President of the United States and has been inaugurated in pomp and circumstance that really has the eyes and ears of the world hanging on every activity. But this particular moment, while important for this nation, has special meaning to the African world community and particular meaning for the African American community. Most of us are not familiar with the history in its grand detail in relationship to the African American community. Washington, as a capital of these United States, is a significant historical sacred space for America. But most people have no idea of the African reference to Washington, D.C.
Ancient Kemet is probably the best model we have of the height of human civilization on the planet Earth. We know that probably there were many civilizations that was older than ancient Kemet, which we call Egypt today, but we don't have records of it. What makes ancient Kemet so magnificent is that we don't have to hypothesize. We don't have to try to guess. The pyramids, Mirkut, is still there. Haru-im-Aketi, who they call the Great Sphinx, it is still there. We can see the timeless temples and tombs. They are all still there. And so they tell the story. And so we don't have to guess. Now, when we come to America, we can see that 53 of the 55 people who signed the Declaration of Independence were all Freemasons. That means they were studying ancient Kemetic studies. They were deeply involved in the science of ancient Kemet, the mathematics, the astronomy, the astrology. All those records are still left in ancient Kemet. Many of the temples are orientated towards certain directions to align themselves with the stars. In ancient Kemet, they said, so is above, so is the below. But they took it literally. They aligned temples on the ground with astrological spots in the sky, alignment with the stars. And so it became real, it became live. And what they did in Washington, D.C. is that these Freemasons tried to do exactly the same thing.
The Washington Monument celebrates the 100th anniversary of the American independence and Washington's presidency. And so the Washington Monument is not built and put in place until the 1800s, 1882. But the interesting thing about the monument, it has an African foundation. Not an African-American foundation, but an African foundation from the root of the African world community, which is Africa, from that special space and place and that special belt of civilization and culture, which we refer to as the Nile. And in that Nile Valley, coming up from the belly of the Nile, the Great Lakes region, and moving down the Nile toward the flowing out of the rivers into the Mediterranean, the greatest civilizing process in the history of humankind took place. And one of the symbols of that civilizing process was the symbol of resurrection and rebirth, which is the African concept that was adopted by the Americans and placed at the center of their new capital.
If you go down 16th Street, you go straight into the White House. It goes into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And when you hit the entrance, there's a prism that lights up and lights up the different colors. That's why in the White House, you have the different color rooms. You have representing the prism, the spectrum of light, of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. So they're trying to tell you that the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, the whole spectrum is supposed to take place in the White House. But all of this, again, is ancient Kemet.
The immediate capital was necessary and was built because of an economic and political struggle between the states of the South that were heavily organized around slavery and the states of the North, who had similar economic interests, but they came from a different perspective. And so Washington, D.C. represents the midpoint between the southern slave states and the states of the North. But from an African point of view, Washington represents much more than that. It is known, but little talked about, that Africans built Washington, D.C. Although the Obama family will be prominent in the White House, they certainly are not the first. First Africans in the White House were those who built it in the 1790s, when Washington commissioned a special presidential and capital district. The initial capitals for the United States was New York and Philadelphia. And so they needed to have a new capital. But as we look at Washington and we look at our history, there are many things that are unseen that need to be clarified. So there's African symbolism and African history. There's Nile Valley symbolism and Nile Valley history in Washington, D.C. The symbolism has been grafted onto American history without any reference to its African counterpart or any reference to the activity of Africans in building Washington. So the drama and the pageantry of an inauguration of a black man, Barack Obama, to the presidency of the United States can blind us to a more serious analysis of the real history. And so let's look at this history step by step. As the president, Barack Obama, swears an oath on the Capitol of the United States, that enormous building where the legislative powers of America are exercised was built by Africans, enslaved Africans, as well as free Africans. And the interesting thing was, there are records in the Capitol noting the payments given to Africans that built the Capitol. And the irony and the contradiction in America becomes very real, because the payments made to Africans for building the Capitol of the United States went to the slave owners who had title to them. So while America celebrated a capital district and new buildings being completed, the contradictions of America are blatantly clear. America celebrating freedom from England, at the same time institutionalizing for the next 100+ years a slave system, which provides the economic foundation for these United States. So as we celebrate this great event, we have to see the contradictions that it represents. There are many unseen things that are in plain view in Washington, but little understood.
Washington, D.C. is one of the first cities in America, actually in the world, that was put on paper before they started anything. And there's 10 square miles. Half of it is in Virginia, and the other half was in Maryland. Now, I want to take just a second to say this. They're trying to imitate a resurrection of Haru. Haru's mother is Mary. Maryland is Mary. Virginia represents the Immaculate Birth. Virginia is short for virgin. So you have the Virgin Mary giving birth to the nation. Half and half. And the Potomac River acts as the HAPI River, which you know is the Nile River. And so on the western side of the Potomac, and they have the Arlington Cemetery is where they buried the dignitaries, the kings. And in ancient Egypt, the western bank is the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Nasuts. So you can see an imitation of everything. And as we go through the city, you will begin to see there is no coincidence here. Abraham Lincoln and George Washington are sitting down trying to look like Abu Simbel, right? And you'll see Mesur Usur Ma'at Ra, Setep Indra, the person they call Ramses II. And they're sitting majestically like this, trying to imitate these powerful African warriors who left their statues and edifice in ancient Kemet. See, the ancient Kemet said there's 4 ways we give reverence to our great ones. First, we speak their name. Number 2, we complete their incompleted works. Number 3, we deify their completed works. And number 4, we leave edifice and images of them everywhere. And so they did exactly that in Washington, D.C. Everywhere you see their heroes. And the hero, the root of that word is Haru. They said ancient Kemet was the old order, and these new European Caucasians was going to issue in the new order. And so they needed the foundation of the old to build their new.